Hello, everybody, and welcome to one of the European Union side events for COP26. This session is entitled Inspire, Inform and Innovate, EU Regional Climate Adaptation Opportunities for Global Action. My name is Kirsten Dunlop. I'm the CEO of EIT Climate Kick and proud to be one of the joint organizers of this session, together with the European Committee of the Regions, as an official European Union side event as part of COP26. I am connecting in and will be moderating from Glasgow and connecting into a panel distributed all over Europe, manifesting, I think, one of the first opportunities to really bring COP in a virtual way simultaneously across the whole world, and in this context, across the whole of Europe, to reflect, in this case, on the question of climate adaptation. I would like, first of all, just to introduce the speakers. You have an extraordinary panel, Johannes Klumpus, who joined the European Commission in 1998 and works at the Directorate General for Climate Action, leading the team for the Climate Adaptation Mission. Councillor Anna Richardson, who is with Glasgow City and was elected as a councillor in Langside, Glasgow in 2015 and re-elected in 2017. And she is currently the city convener for sustainability and carbon reduction, and has just been speaking earlier today with me at the COP UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub. Maria Lopez Sanchez is the General Director for Environmental Quality and Climate Change as part of the regional government of Andalusia. She's a very experienced expert in sustainability, strategic planning and efficiency improvement projects in both public and private sectors. And Marco Markula, the President of the Helsinki region, Vice President of the European Committee of the Regions, and was the President for many years between 2015 and 2017. He has been the Committee of the Regions rapporteur on a number of very important pieces of work and opinions focused on innovation, on digitalization, on research policy, on industrial renaissance, startups and climate. And just recently, he has been appointed as the Committee of the Regions rapporteur on the European missions, so bringing a very valuable perspective to this panel today. Let me start by just making a couple of reflections on what a busy year it has been for adaptation in Europe. This is the year in which the EU adaptation strategy has been launched, the climate adaptation mission implementation plan has been developed and now is going into a live call for proposals. And we have Race to Resilience at COP with a strong presence and focus from the contribution from the European Union. And indeed, last night was the opening of the Resilience Hub as part of the official COP events, the UNFCCC Resilience Hub, calling attention in very, very strong terms to the fact that adaptation, climate resiliency is finally where it needs to be, as considered as a need and an urgency that is just as important as climate mitigation, as we begin to see the effects of climate change affect us all, and as we begin to understand the way we prepare, the way we protect, and the way we regenerate needs to pay attention to societal resilience, to economic transformation, and to adaptation in all senses, and that is part of our mitigation efforts as well. The key theme of this discussion today will be moving from strategy to action. This conversation will be held in two parts. We will be first looking at the development of the EU adaptation strategy and what has gone into that in terms of reflections and priorities and the role of regions. And secondly, we're going to be looking at the issues delivering that on the ground. Most importantly, this conversation is framed up, as you can see behind me, with a recognition at all levels, policy, business, implementation of innovation and regional actions, that climate adaptation must be understood and be addressed as a systemic challenge, as a systems challenge that needs to be brought to life on the ground in those terms. And we will have here representatives from both the Commission and from the committees of the regions and from local regions and cities themselves, talking about how we might make that real and translate those kinds of policy commitments into something that is tangible and meaningful for the people who live in our cities and our regions, and they begin to understand why climate action matters for them and for their families. So I'm going to start by asking Johannes Klumpus, please, representing European Commission, why has the Commission chosen to focus on regions and on local level actions in this policy area?
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Great to be here at this COP side event, although I'm not in Glasgow, but remotely participating, and great to be on the panel with Maria, Anna, and Marco and you. The regions, indeed, why are we focusing on them? It is not maybe the most straightforward or most often occurring focus that we have, because most of the time European Commission interacts with the member states level and through formal committees and so on. But regions, we consider them, well, we have always considered them very important, but when it comes to climate adaptation, that is even, or adaptation to climate change, it is even more so, because the changes that need to take place, it is there where they need to happen, at the regional and the local level. And it's those people in the regional and local governments that have to deal with all of it at the same time. They have European legislation, national legislation, regional legislation. They have pressure from their own, from the citizens living there, from the local, from the companies acting there, and they have to take a lot of complicated decisions that will be leading them over the coming decades. And so we wanted, with a mission, to provide, we hope that we can provide a helping hand to those people who are facing these difficult situations and decision-making processes now on the ground.
Thank you. Maybe I think just one further question on that particular point. Where do you think, how do you think the mission and the framing of a mission that is really appealing to hearts and minds, how do you see the European Commission being able to facilitate the connection into regional level decision-making and regional level action?
Well, the missions as a concept is a new concept. Has not existed in previous planning periods in the European Union. And the concept as such has been built up to facilitate not the acquisition, but the use of existing knowledge by people like in this case regions or local actors. So the knowledge that is available on adaptation, on climate risks, coming from climate models and so on, and to use that knowledge to the best in their region. And so the mission is about that, is bringing this knowledge together with those people who need to make decisions and actions on the ground. And that is what the concept of the mission is about. And so on the one side, using knowledge, not necessarily creating new knowledge. That might happen as well, but that is not in the focus of the mission. There might be new knowledge coming out, obviously, in all the interactions between the people and the lessons learned and so on. But it's first and foremost, it's about using the knowledge, applying it on the ground, and using the best knowledge available at a certain time, which is not always easy for regions and local actors, because they not automatically have access to that, or not easily. It takes effort very often, and it's that we hopefully can facilitate from the European level, making that accessible and employable by people who might not in their daily business interact with innovators or researchers.
Thank you very much. So let's take that set of reflections now to regions and to cities working directly on the ground. Climate is very proud to call the region and the city of Glasgow a partner in initiatives that we launched as deep demonstrations a little while ago, to try and put into practice a learning space, experimentation space for systemic approaches to transformation. And we have been immensely impressed by the way in which Glasgow has picked up and done work in this really grounded systemic way. So if I may, Councillor Richardson, your adaptation strategy in Glasgow is quite different, very, very different to the past. Why did you include a systems perspective, and how have people reacted to a strategy like that?
Thanks for that question. This is a strategy in which we've laid out exactly what will be required by a city region if we're to thrive in a future climate. So this isn't about small steps anymore, this is about transformation. This is about having that high ambition. It's about making sure that everyone's involved, whether that's public bodies, businesses, or local communities. And the only way we can achieve that is by taking a systems approach, because we can't achieve what we need to achieve without changing everything: culture, finance, our institutions, our governance, the way that we work together. And we need to acknowledge the interconnectedness of all of these systems so that we can identify where we can most effectively push for change. And where we see that there are barriers to this transformation, now is the time that we need to do what we need to do to remove those. So within this strategy, we've got 11 strategic interventions, and they will help to shape our activity over the coming decade. Some of these interventions are incremental change, others are absolutely transformational. They'll change what we need to do and how we need to deliver it. And as we move through these interventions, it's not just a response then to adapting the systems that are there, but moving towards activity that brings wider social benefits as well. So it's not just about the adaptation, but it's about improving health inequalities and the built environment of our city and our region as well. And this approach around social justice, around improving quality of life for everybody, is the approach that Glasgow has been committed to taking across all of our climate actions. This is about improving Glaswegians' lives and those across the wider region. And for example, interventions such as building capacity to enable our vulnerable communities to be part of this process, or having nature-based solutions at the heart of so much of our work is critical, because it does bring all those other benefits. And I'm really proud to say that the response has been very positive towards this strategy so far, in part due to recognition that we need to have this scale of ambition and we need to have a holistic approach. And I think there's also a greater understanding now of what is at stake with changing weather patterns. Here in Glasgow, we're already trying to deal with higher temperatures, with buildings that aren't used and aren't designed for those types of temperatures. We're getting more frequent flash flooding, even in the last week or two. We've seen problems with our transport network as a result. And I think that's helping people to connect these issues in their mind. And there's also a strong economic case for change as well. That's being recognised, and I think that is giving us an opportunity now to build momentum for this action.
Are there reflections on the strategy process itself? What conditions have emerged or need to be in place for you to be able to go through such a profoundly different strategy development, perhaps within the regional government or within the city government? Do you have any reflections on that?
I think everybody needs to understand exactly how pressing the challenge is and have an understanding of what we all want to achieve. There has been openness and a desire to work together, and certainly in Glasgow we've got several examples of where we have had partnership working, so not one local authority working together but many across the region, but also bringing in those other national organisations or specialist organisations that are able to help to develop that work. And I think having that openness to partnership, openness to different governance structures that really respond to the challenge that we have is something I think we're learning at and we're getting pretty good at.
Fantastic. Now, just a quick reminder to everyone listening in, if you have questions for any of the panelists or for all of us as a panel, you can pose those questions on the live chat and the live discussion area, and we will bring them into the discussion as we work through. So please do take the opportunity to engage directly. So let me move instead to a region and a city and a region in the other part of Europe equally, if anything, experiencing the onset of climate change in very dramatic ways, Andalusia. May I ask you, Maria Lopez, you've just launched the Andalusian Climate Action Plan. My congratulations. I'm very interested in reading how comprehensive it is. How have you balanced climate adaptation and mitigation in this strategy?
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Good afternoon, and thank you for having us here today. Well, as you know, Andalusia is one of the largest regions in Europe with 87,000 square kilometers and a population of 8.7 million, larger than many other European regions and countries. This makes it necessary to gauge the risk we face adequately if we want to properly manage our territory and assess the results we obtain, all while comparing their adjustment to national and international policies. Our climate and situation makes us especially vulnerable to certain natural phenomena, such as heat waves and droughts, as well as other extreme meteorological events, storms, strong winds, and floods. This also makes us one of the most vulnerable regions in Europe, in the European Union, according to the ESPON reports. At the same time, our economic development model is very vulnerable to climate change impacts, as indicated in the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report, particularly in the sectors of agriculture, forestry, infrastructures, energy, and public health. It goes without saying that the first step that must be taken in order to trace a sensible climate change strategy is to properly assess the risks involved. As without this assessment, it is impossible to properly manage our territory nor monitor progress. Our region has been aware of this situation for quite some time, and for this reason, we have taken a step toward the approval of our law on measures against climate change. The development policy reports help us understand that mitigation measures take place from the individual level to higher level, yet adaptation efforts involve interest group, local and regional administrations. Resulting from our law on measure against climate change, the regional government of Andalusia has delivered the Andalusian Climate Action Plan. Our plan accounts for 3 programs: the adaptation program, the mitigation program, and the communication and participation program. Our climate action plan has been drafted, taking into account orientations provided by the European Green Deal and the EU policies. And another element that we are very proud of is that the plan was drafted through a highly participative effort involving different organizations such as the European Investment Bank's Jaspers Group, Climate Geek, the Andalusian Public Administration Institute, as well as different sectorial general directorates from across our regional administration and public participation processes. As mentioned before, we understand that adaptation actions are best implemented from community efforts, from the local and regional levels. So it is necessary to carry out our work from a multi-level approach. We combine self-risk assessment through territorial direct data collection and then comparing results with national and international adaptation policies. In order to reach local administrations, we provide them access to a series of tools to allow them to develop and implement their climate change strategies.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just getting myself off mute. And can I ask, has the role of climate adaptation changed in this strategy compared to your past one? What has changed in the way in which you have placed an emphasis in this action plan on adaptation?
Well, as I mentioned, this is a multi-level approach. And we provide assistance to local administrations through the following tools: a methodology on how to define municipal risk, municipal climate change plan. This provides local administration guidelines on how to proceed with risk and vulnerability assessment, emission inventory, and how to define specific mitigation and adaptation actions, a carbon footprint calculator, a future climate scenarios viewer for all our municipalities, up to 700 municipalities in Andalusia. Also, coordination structures to properly define functional working groups, and carrying out and participating in pilot projects. These tools are operational and functional and have allowed for municipalities across our region to meet their commitments as signatories of the Covenant of measures and climate and energy. The regional government of Andalusia has also included in its methodology these commitments, some of which the goals enriched have been not only met, but even surpassed. Another tool that helped bridge the gap with the private sector is the Andalusian Emission Registry and Compensation System. This tool allows businesses to voluntarily register their emissions and carry out compensation measures. These measures not only include the traditional reforestation actions, but also blue carbon action for marine ecosystem, thanks to the work and result obtained from the Live Blue Natura project, which will publicly share its results at the end of this month. Another very important outcome of our law is the resulting diverse institutional and participatory bodies that it defines. The Interdepartamental Commission, the Andalusian Climate Change Office, and the Andalusian Climate Change Council. For the 2021 to 2030 period, the Climate Action Plan includes 137 action lines across the mitigation, the adaptation, and the communication and participation programs. These are translated into the following figures. In mitigation, we will reach a reduction in emission of 39% across different sectors, which include agriculture, industry, and infrastructures. 39.5% in energy consumption and accounting for 42% of energy supplied for renewable energy sources. In adaptation, we will reduce the risk of climate change impacts by defining sectoral goals for water resource, flood risk, agriculture and livestock, land use and tourism management. The communication and participation programs is focused on dissemination and training actions, providing access to information and sensitizing society. Our plan foresees a careful prioritization of action of our regional government. As such, the estimated financial investment from our budgetary funds adds up to 6.2 thousand million euros, a clearly executive plan. As I mentioned at the beginning, Andalusia is a particularly vulnerable region and our economy strongly depends on climate. A change simply isn't enough. We need an economic and social change, reason for which we are working very hard on long-term infrastructure, education, and planning. And to help us achieve this goal, the plan also considers horizontal action that affect decision-making process and social change, environmental taxation, improving administrative procedures, green public procurement, sustainability criteria and investment, budgeting with climate perspective, knowledge management, cooperation, and institutional governance. It is not only about implementing action, but also about learning and improving on how to conceive them and carry them out.
That's something I'd really like to come back to as we go through our second round, because I think this is one of the major advantages and opportunities as we take a regional perspective to share learnings amongst regions. So let me now move, apropos of that, to Marco, and ask you, representing, in fact, the many regions in the Committee of the Regions, you naturally focus on regional and local levels. What, from your perspective, are the key success factors in motivating cities and regions with their industries, their SMEs, micro SMEs, and their citizens to co-create roadmaps and accelerate measures towards adaptation?
Okay, thank you, Kirsten, and great to be with you and the others in this panel, because this all, as actually Maria just said, the key message from her at the end was learning. So this is all about learning, and learning what you, Kirsten, you have at your background, system change. So this is, I think, the key on the whole thing, that we need at the city level, at the regional level, all parts of Europe and globally, we need to be thinking about how to make this systematic change to happen, how to orchestrate different parallel activities, how to get everyone involved, and from that then speeding up, accelerating our activities in tackling the change. And of course, I think the main success factor practically is that everyone sees the climate change affecting our daily lives. We have had these enormous storms, high temperature heat waves, forest fires. So people everywhere, we are waking up. And I always say we, because I'm among the others, so that we need to be more committed to these activities. And what is important at the EU level, so Commission last spring provided the new adaptation strategy, highlighting one key element for us, for the decision makers at the local level. Losses due to the climate change already averaged 12 billion euros per year. So 12 billion euros, and that is when we are in charge of our budgeting and the taxes and where to focus. So we need to think this financial aspect very strongly, and always linking these together. So especially here in our Helsinki region, in my city Espoo, we always stress that tackling climate change, we have on sustainability, we have 4 cornerstones, 4 dimensions. Of course, environmental and economic, linked to the social, but we encourage everywhere to think about the cultural aspects as well. Cultural, including learning, or let's take the new Bauhaus as an EU instrument, new mindset, what we have done with the smart specialization strategies, integrating regions in Europe to work more together. It means entrepreneurial mindset, and that is above all changing our mindset to be more collaborative. And of course, when we think about the COP26 there, so I think that our Committee of the Region key message for the United Nations, EU and national governments is that they should definitely now recognize the crucial role of local and regional authorities, cities and regions, and include that as strongly officially in the conclusions as well, so that we can mobilize our activities, and that is so that we really can tackle these issues. And if I take the perspective of the success factors from this regional perspective, so we have in our region, Helsinki region, we are actually now taking to our next council meeting on regional level to target to become carbon neutral already by 2030. So much faster than, let's say, close to all of the other regions in the world. And that is then linked at the same time that we want to increase the research and development investments up to 5% of the GDP. And that's mainly our message to industry. Industry investments to prepare successful new products, systems, and so on. And then the third key kind of measurable focus area of our regional strategies, increase our employment rate up to 80% of the population at the age of employment. So those go together. So it's not a separate issue, this climate or climate adaptation, as we defined last June in our Committee of the Region opinion on adaptation, so that the ambition level needs to be higher than so far. We need to work more together, local collaboration, European partnerships, more global responsibility to achieve more. We need to see that adaptation and mitigation, they go hand in hand, and that EU needs to encourage forerunner measures the way that Andalusia was just explaining, so that then we can learn from that. And there we come to what Johannes said earlier in this panel about the knowledge, importance of knowledge. And as you, Kerstin, as you know from the EIT Climate Kick, so good practices, best practices, sharing those and learning to work together through innovation camps and other forms of activity. They are the success factors, and they need to include not only our civil servants, but political decision makers, us as well. So we need to be part of that change process. And then we need to integrate our citizens. And there we come to implementing the SDG Sustainable Development Goals. And we are really doing now in Finland with all our 6 largest cities together joint activities. What does this reaching the targets of the SDGs, what does that mean in concrete format, and how to organize? And that's partnerships, contracts, collaboration with schools, with kindergartens, and with industry, large and small. And I think that's the key success for the whole issue. It's for all of us to make the ambition level to become a reality.
Thank you, Markku. Thank you very much indeed. We have a couple of questions coming through in the chat. I think one of the things I'd really like to emphasize as we now move to say, okay, we are beginning to carve out a much more explicit, structured and comprehensive space for action in adaptation, and to call for adaptation innovation as a critical part, as you said, Markku, deeply interdependent with the way in which we think about mitigation, drawing and building on knowledge, drawing and sharing knowledge across. And all of you have spoken about the importance of connecting that to the reality of climate change, and climate adaptation is really where climate becomes real and people really begin to understand. So let me, I'm going to ask a question back to each of you, and I'll ask you just to pay attention and see the chat as we go. You'll see the questions that are starting to come. Johannes, can I bring the Commission's perspective here in terms of moving to action? How would you see a body like the European Commission able to plan in such a way as to empower regions and to enable them? How do we see a possibility for the Commission now really beginning to empower at subnational level with something like the implementation of the adaptation strategy and the missions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kirsten. I mean, the reply to that question is that with the mission, what we try to do is that we want to assist the regions in their, some researchers call it transformative pathway. And it depends on at what level the regions are in. We have now heard examples from Anna and from Maria about regions where a lot of preparation, a lot of thought has already been put into the question of how they might need to prepare for climate change. There are also regions in Europe who have not yet really started that process, or who are less advanced. And we would like to, with the mission, provide help for all levels of preparedness of regions. So the regions that have not yet really given a thought to adaptation, we would like to offer a little bit of help around also what Maria was describing, namely risk assessments. So for those regions, we would like them to provide with help, tools, guidance, how to carry out a consistent risk assessment in their regions. And then that would be, that is a first step, a first objective we have. A second one would be for those regions that have already carried out those risk assessments, who know already, well, in our region, among all the climate risks, there is these two maybe that are the most important that we need to tackle. And so our question is now, how do we go about aligning everything that needs to be done in our region? That can reach from small innovation demonstration projects up to thinking through what needs to happen at different legislative regulatory levels, because one can never forget that the region has a certain power for certain things that it needs remit, but then there are always things that are not on the remit of the regional level, which goes to the national level, for example. Building codes, building standards is a typical example. I mean, a region can, of course, decide by innovative public procurement, for example, to say, well, if I have to rebuild my town hall, for example, well, I give it the best shot that this is both a great town hall in terms of mitigation, but also adaptation, so that it both is a extremely low energy consuming, but that it also protects against heat at the same time. So they can of course procure such a building. They can give an example, but the rules for the building standards, the region usually cannot influence it alone. That is often at a higher level. And so there needs a lot of things to be decided, but the region is not alone. It can of course act on these things. And if they then develop a plan, what is it I can do myself? What is it where I can give an example? What is it where I need to work actually on my higher levels? So a kind of comprehensive plan. And that is where we also would like to provide help to a couple of to those regions who are at that level, and those regions who are really advanced, that really know exactly this is what we have to do, and this is what I can do myself. For those that really want to enter into a larger demonstration activity, you imagine, for example, an area that wants to protect itself a lot better against flooding compared to what happened in the past. They might need to undertake actions in terms of giving space to rivers, defining floodplains, and combining this with maybe in cities technical measures, or so a whole combination of things that need to be done at the same time, and that costs money. You need maybe to buy land. You need to convince farmers that they cannot actually do their normal agriculture anymore in that area because that might be flooded regularly, and all that costs money, and that money might need in certain cases also, or not might, in many cases it will need private funding. So here comes also a question of can the investors, the banks, can they come in here together with companies, and of course together as well with the knowledge providers, and that is a third level which we would like to provide to the regions, and that is the most complicated, and that will depend on really getting a buy-in also from banks, for example. And at the end, what we hope with all of that is that all of these levels of regions, that they feel more comfortable also making requests to their governments or making requests to the European Union, that they not only sit there and suffer and say and wait for the instructions, but that they are able, empowered, as you said, to reverse that process, that they can say, well, this is what I need. I know that I have done all what it takes to define this. So you government, this is what you have to do that I can achieve that, so that we have some kind of a more balanced power, you were using that word, situation between the regional level and maybe the national or the European level.
Okay, so it's like an enablement of multi-level, multi-actor, multi-scale, and the
Yes.
role in which, in fact, that platforming effect of a mission that is at a European Commission level can have in terms of unlocking a more systemic vertical axis of actions. Thank you very much. Can I move now to you, Anne, in Glasgow? I'm going to ask you the question on challenges, because I know one of the big issues here is it's just not that simple. What challenges do you see in the way in which you implement the adaptation strategy? It lays out a bold and a very different vision. Where do you see you might run into difficulties, and where do you see opportunities to do something about that?
I think we have to be very open about the challenges, and one of them is simply the sheer scale of the transformation that we're looking at here. We're not talking about continuing business as usual, but we also realise that we need everybody to get on board to make that happen, and for everybody to prioritise adaptation and this climate action through all of their work, whatever other priorities they might have. And that is a big ask, but it is what we're going to have to do if we're going to deliver on this. I think, although that does feel difficult, we're in a good place at the moment in terms of the engagement, the momentum that we're feeling here in Glasgow, both in terms of emissions reduction and also adaptation. And I think we are starting to get to a position where there is a shared understanding of how this work will improve the lives of our people, and how there are those opportunities to bring all those other improvements as well. I think that is a real way that we can get buy-in to this work. We have got some projects already underway that I think are starting to show what we mean by working collaboratively, by working in partnership, by tackling the adaptation issues that we have. So for example, we have the Clyde Climate Forest, which is a key outcome from this adaptation strategy. We are planting 18 million trees across the region in the next decade. And that will only be delivered through this partnership, through the different local authorities, looking at what's achievable within our own areas, working with the expertise that we have locally and nationally around how we can create new woodland, how we can improve canopy cover, how we can improve lives in our city, in our urban parts of the region, as well as further out with that. And as I say, we're getting started on these projects. 18 million is a huge number, but in the last year alone in Glasgow City, and that's the most the most densely populated part of our region, we have created a new woodland site with 37,000 trees. And part of that work has been not just the adaptation, but bringing people with us and getting people engaged with this, because, and we were talking this morning in a session together about how important it is that people feel part of this and that people feel engaged and understand why things have to happen. So as part of that woodland creation, we brought every single primary school in Glasgow, so that's children under 12, to the site, and they all planted saplings that they had grown from acorns into that site. And I think the value of that project is not just in the trees, it's in all the climate education and empowerment that comes from our youngest citizens. So that's the type of work that we've been doing. And again, looking at drainage as well, looking at flood risk. This is an issue that's affecting some of our most vulnerable people who are least able to cope when flooding happens, when flash flooding happens. So again, across the region, we're working together with a range of projects through a strategic drainage partnership. So we can do suds ponds and basins, we can create green spaces in areas where they were underused because they weren't pleasant, but they're now recreational spaces, as well as having that flood mitigation. And then we've got large infrastructure projects like our smart canal, whereby we're able to drop the level of the water in the canal in preparation for heavy rainfall, and that creates that more manageable runoff of that surface water. So we have a lot of ideas of how we can actually deliver on this and how we can try and deal with the challenges of the scale of the problem, and also the buy-in and getting people to come with us, because these projects are directly improving the city region as well as tackling adaptation, and I think that's absolutely key. But we all need to work together. We know that that's the only way that we're going to get there. I think right now, with COP26 here in our city for the next fortnight, we have a real opportunity to get more traction on this. I think we've boosted every climate conversation across the city. I think it's on everyone's lips in a way that it never was before. And I think that as well, that energy is an opportunity to tackle some of the challenges, to move forward, even when it feels really quite difficult.
Well, we were talking about in the first round around mindsets and culture change. And of course, the physical experience of planting trees that you have grown from an acorn really, really helps with that. We have a question about nature-based solutions, and you've talked about many. I think that it would be really helpful to get a sense of, in that implementation, how much of the willingness to work with the leading edge technology solutions, as well as, say, fiscal design to enhance nature-based solutions, is that in the implementation plan? Is there an openness around that sort of leading edge of climate adaptation innovation?
As a city, we love innovation and we love trying new things, so absolutely we're very open to innovation. We have a lot of nature-based solutions that are being delivered, and we're also working with Horizon 2020 with other cities for our Connecting Nature project, which is about nature-based solutions, and it's about looking at how do we innovate, how do we think about the structures that are there, how do we deliver them in a strategic way, and how are we hitting other outcomes along the way. So nature-based solutions are going to have to be a very holistic part of what we're doing, and they have to be embedded in a huge amount of the work that we need to take forward.
Indeed, so that is fully systemic and connected through to decisions. Thank you. Perhaps if I can add one you advise others to think to achieve that kind of measure or learnings? Did the sound come through okay?
No, sorry, but we haven't heard you properly. You can repeat.
You lost
please?
that. Okay, let me just repeat. Yes, of course. I'm just looking out to one of the questions in the chat that was very specific to Andalusia. How do you plan on evidencing that the measures that you're putting in place are being used and monitoring their progress? And perhaps if you have advice for other regions, how may they learn from the moves that you've made to go ahead?
Well, we have different kind of tools and different kind of measure for different kind of publics. So focusing in our strategy to support the municipal action plans, the municipal climate action, sorry. First of all, I would like to say that the drafting of the municipal plans in Andalusia is an obligation. So they need to do it. The problem is that our municipalities not always have the technical resource. Drafting those plans is a very difficult work because of the high level technical content of them. So so we have provided them all those tools, and we have designed that strategy of support together. So this tool, with the participation of the municipalities, we have responded to their needs. So in the first stage of the strategy, where the municipalities need to draft these plans, we don't think they will have another option. They will take the tools that we have provided and that we have designed together in the multi-level working groups in this first stage. In the next stage, when the municipalities need to renew the plans, we will stop, we will study, and we will see where we can improve, where each tool could be improved in the technical content, or maybe if any tool have not been useful for the municipalities in the drafting or the plans, in the evaluation progress, or whatever. So we think that we are going to build this strategy together, as well as we have designed it together. What we think they will need, the municipalities, in order of, as the, I don't know, the carbon footprint calculator, the climate scenarios viewer. So we will see in the future if all those tools are useful, have been used, and the success of the strategy or no. And we will do it together in multi-level group in collaboration with the municipalities.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And it's of course, a steady process of working through using, observing, reviewing, and checking, and iterating, and changing it themselves. Marco, you are the Committee of the Region rapporteur on European missions. And I know that the Committee of the Regions regularly stresses the importance of multi-level governance and synergy, the role of regions, the fundamental importance in trying to manage the tiers that we have in policymaking using different instruments. How, in your view, how can we accelerate this transformation, given that we have very, very little time? And I'm surrounded by a real ferment and concern now that we are just going to miss our chance.
Okay, let me take just a few of the examples, so that first of all, so that we all need to develop the new, let's say, local level instruments and tools, apply them what we are doing, and that definitely needs to happen in partnership. So we need these local kind of contracts, city or regional level contracts, not a kind of legal binding, but motivating, encouraging actors to work together. And there the industry plays a crucial role. And with respect to that, so let me take that a good example on the whole big picture, because we need new solutions, we need new technology. And very recently, the International Energy Agency made a really good analysis on the reduction in carbon emissions. So what is needed? So they came up to the conclusion that 41% of the technology needed will come from new technologies that are currently in the early adaptation phase. And then 34% will come from technology at the demonstration state or just the prototyping. And only 1/4, 25% is something that we already have and existing. So we need to encourage our industry and our governments to invest more in research and development and create these. But for that we need these missions as well. And I'm very pleased that climate adaptation is one of the missions, carbon neutrality through the smart city activities by 2030 is really kind of forerunner mission. And then we have oceans and waters, we have the soil, and then cancer. In all of those, we need new knowledge, as we've stressed here already today. And that means that think about where do they come, this new knowledge come to reality. It's really the city level where the industry operates and where the universities train their young talents and so on. So there is this happening, and that's again the systematic change, orchestrating the activities. And let me add 2 examples from my own city, because we worked with the UN Habitat and so on with the SDGs, how to implement those much faster than 2030. So we kind of created a learning process, what is called nowadays a 7 steps to strategic SDG sense making in cities. We just started to share that with the UN family, and that is something that we learn concretely, use the virtual platforms for that and so on. The other approach, very, let's say, similar to what Andalusia, Maria described. So when we implement, orchestrate our carbon neutrality, we just defined with the City Council our next 4-year program, and it includes now the roadmap to carbon neutrality to 2030. It is deeper to that, is that the co-creating smart city innovations that we do together with the research centers and universities, industry, and especially then the closest to the citizens is the partnerships and commitment using these city contracts. And I think these experiences, they fit perfectly well with practically all of the missions. And that's why we need this kind of collaboration at the practical level with the mission managers, and that is something that I have high priority in my personal activity list now, to plan together with the Commission how to do these implementation plans, accelerate the move of the mission so that there really will be a bottom-up movement, not just separate projects as we have done, and their organizations existing like EIT, KICS, or the smart specialization strategies. So we need to get everyone on board with the missions, and that's clear target. And I'm very proud so that it looks that Europe can really make this to happen, but we need all actors on this.
Well, exactly on that note, Europe can really make this to happen. I think there's a real tone of a sense of European leadership and European commitment to action in creating initiatives that are raising the bar, and where the discussion here in Glasgow, at least through yesterday and so far today, has been about a mission-led logic being about not doing what is possible or plausible, but doing what is needed. Yeah. And where we know there is a catastrophically large gap between what is possible and feasible and currently and what is needed, and that is the gap for innovation and for mission-led logic. I think what we've been discussing is the extent to which regional and local governments are uniquely placed to establish ambitious climate change adaptation agendas, because they are living with that problem, as Johannes, you said right from the beginning. And we see examples of that in action in Glasgow, Andalusia, many other European regions. Perhaps if I can bring this session towards its conclusion with a look outwards to the role that Europe may play within the world. We have a number of questions in the chat about developing countries and the implications of climate change effects, climate adaptation, innovation, climate adaptation strategies. Johannes, do you have a view on the way in which European initiatives to enhance the effort and build forward an implementation plan in climate adaptation in Europe can be relevant and useful in developing contexts?
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and thank you very much for that question. I have so far spoken in this event about the mission on adaptation to climate change. That mission was designed as a European initiative, also by the mission board members. So that was a group of external advisors sitting on that board. They have on purpose designed it as a European focused initiative. However, there is and Kirsten, you were rightly mentioning that in the beginning of 2021, so it's only a couple of months old, the European Union has adopted the EU adaptation strategy, and that adaptation strategy has four big objectives, and one of those objectives is called Stepping Up International Action for Climate Resilience. Now, personally, I'm not working with that is colleagues, so I'm happy to establish context there. But I can roughly say what the EU would like to do here, namely that that there is a higher amount of resources available also for the developing countries, and to prioritize actions and to increase their work in the area of resilience. The Commission is thinking of international finance and also stronger global engagement and commitments. And I think this is a reinforcement or a confirmation of policies that the European Commission has in place for a while, because I think it is fair to say that the Commission over the last years has been, when you think about the Paris Agreement, for example, and even previously to that, been a very vocal actor to make the global entente, the global collaboration and global agreements happen and to facilitate it. And I think the European Commission totally stands by this. And I mean, it is totally clear that with climate change, there is actually no other way than it is a global phenomenon, and to want to address it only on the regional level, although that is the focus for the missions, and which is also makes a lot of sense, but it needs to be complemented absolutely by actions on the global level. And I hope that we see here more, and that I hope that the adaptation strategy, which was welcomed by the Parliament, was welcomed, Marco, if I recall correctly, by the Committee of Regions, so that we, with that strategy, also get an improvement on the international level.
Indeed. And so we'll close then with the reflection on a global world of local communities that somehow really need to find a way to act together. Andalusia is united by the Mediterranean with Africa. Glasgow is facing into some of the most dynamic sea change and ocean change that we see. We are in one whole community. So let's thank you very much, every one of you, for contributing to this session. I think we conclude with a reflection that this is a time now, and it is happening now, to push past strategies and agendas and into the delivery of climate resilient actions. And those actions need to be transformational. But probably most of all, I think one of the things that each of you has reflected on, this is also a wonderful opportunity to boost resiliency as a way of community building, social cohesion building, jobs, new jobs, different economies, different ways of living. And this is also one of the ways in which we connect up and help with climate mitigation and with just transition. So thank you very much, everyone, for an important discussion happening just at the right moment. and very important to reinforce Europe's commitment to making this one of the primary courses of action. And thank you to those listening for your questions and for your thoughtful provocations to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. You are not online.